All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath, 16th day of April, Tuesday. Joining us here in just a minute is the proprietor of one of my favorite websites, usawatchdog.com. He was an establishment media guy until he decided he wasn't going to. He didn't really like how they were treating him in the establishment media, or he wasn't. You told us the story last time you were on here, Greg. It was you were being battled by exposing some of the truth, especially. Was it business you were in prior to?
Actually, I always just did investigative work.
Yeah.
And I found the financial story to be increasingly the story of our time.
Yeah.
And I started looking into it because all investigative reporters do is look at data. And the data just looked god-awful in 2007. And the President, Bush, at the time, some people think I'm an anti-Obama guy. I'm really not. People thought I was an anti-Bush guy. I'm really not. I'm just a truth guy. But back in the days of Bush, they couldn't figure out whether we were in a recession. You know, we knocked out autos, housing, and the banks, and we're not in a recession.
Yeah.
There are no legs on the three-legged stool there. And then, but also that all the banks were in trouble. They were all in trouble. All my sources said that. I was putting these sources on CNBC, on CNBC. It was Freudian slip, on CNN.
Right.
And I was vetting them, and they were holding water. These were good sources of people, and all my sources were right.
And somebody upstairs didn't like that, right? Somebody upstairs didn't like that, right? When you were bringing these.
Listen, nobody said anything to me. I didn't have any nasty, tawdry, stealing or interns, or I'm happily married. Everything's fine with that. They just didn't renew my contract. I'm thinking, wow. 6 months later, it was funny. One of the vice presidents was in the New York newsroom 8 months later, something like that, and said, "Hey, why didn't we see this coming?" And I'm serious. This is a true story. One loan producer held her hand up and said, Greg Hunter was all over this. Change of subject.
Yeah, moving on.
And I was all over. I had good sources. I would never put anything crazy on the air.
Greg, tell me if I'm wrong. I believe you have good sources. I believe you still have good sources, and that's why I go to USA Watchdog every single day. That's why I have it bookmarked, and everybody listening should as well. But tell me if I'm wrong on this. Now, I was an observer at this time in your life. I was an observer of the establishment media. And I observed something in 2007 leading us out of the Bush era into the Obama era, and I'm 100% in lockstep agreement with you. I have no more ill will towards Obama and his administration than I did Bush and his administration, because frankly, I don't see a difference at all. Period.
Oh, I don't either. And frankly, I'm happy a black man was elected president of the United States, and I'll tell you why. Because the Constitution worked. The Constitution is equal protection, equal opportunity. Hey, that it was a good thing.
Yeah.
But now when it comes to running the country, I don't care what color you are, what sex you are. I mean, they're running the country that will benefit the few, and it's
right. They're all green. They're all green when it comes to who's running the country.
Yes. Oh yeah. There's no difference.
I meant to do this last time you were on, and since I remembered it now, I'm going to ask. As I was saying, I was an observer during this time when you were bringing your sources that were proven to be 100% accurate in 2007, 2008.
All my guys, all the people I talked to, got it right.
Right. And it seemed to me that those folks, and I'm you don't have to name names now, but I'm going to say people such as Ron Paul. He was a rock star at that time on the establishment media.
He was absolutely right.
He was right, and he was allowed to speak in a way that he wasn't monikered as a nut job. Peter Schiff, he was all over the establishment media.
Absolutely correct. They're giving Peter Schiff crap now because gold had this big sell-off, but I think, we've had an 11-year market. I'm not a gold analyst, but we've had an 11-year market. I mean, they're taking assets over in Cyprus. They're saying, well, Cyprus had to sell its gold. It didn't sell their gold. It was seized.
It was taken from them.
It was seized. That gold like that never makes it to COMEX or LBMA. That doesn't go there. That doesn't go there directly and then get sold off to the market. No way. That ends up in some central bank vault, probably Germany's or in Netherlands or the
ECB.
Yeah. That got seized. Widely reported that gold was seized. 3/4 of it, supposedly.
Yeah, and European Stability ESM is what I meant to say. But let me get back to that point. I thought in 2008, and then I started getting into independent media, it seemed that if it was going to be used to scare the hell out of Mr. and Mrs. Jane and Joe Sixpack, they would put him in front of a television. Kramer freaking out, right? We have to have these bailouts. We have to have these extraordinary measures. We have to give the central bank more power. It was all well and good to terrify the people of the country. But as soon as that ball started rolling and we started to, we truly did suspend, kill, destroy free market capitalism in order to save it, then anybody who was a mainstream figure or establishment media figure like Ron Paul, like Peter Schiff, even Glenn Beck a little bit, he was given leeway until the purpose was served to scare the people in the country into letting these extraordinary measures take place. Then all those people were swept aside. They were swept aside, and they're nothing but a nutball now. And I know that's very conspiratorial, but it seems that they'll let bad news out in increments if it benefits the same few that have been rescued and saved over these last so many years. Sound crazy?
Listen, the establishment was never going to let Ron Paul from the very first deal in Iowa, where
right.
A pickup truck full of ballots. Oh, really? They don't have tablets, iPhones. They don't have a pickup truck in a college town where young people, which 50% of young people voted for Ron Paul. I think the Republicans have made a huge mistake in not bringing Ron Paul and young people of all colors into the tent.
Oh, yeah.
The Tea Party, I mean, here we have, here. I want to tell you something. I'm going to put this in my weekly news wrap-up, so it's a preview. And this is, I live in Greensboro, I live near Greensboro, North Carolina, okay? That is the home of the Woolworth lunch counter sit-in. You know the term sit-in?
Yeah.
That term happened because of 4 black youths at North Carolina A&T had the guts to put on suits and ties and go to the whites-only counter and sit there and try to get served as a protest. Right. Okay, so that's the term sit-in, right? So some of the people still live there. Here we have a local TV. It says right here, it says supporters. Can you read that? It says
Tea Party supporters.
Vent. All right?
Grievances. Yep. Tea Party
you read
support.
That? Okay.
Grievances.
What does everybody say about the Tea Party? That it's a bunch of white, crazy, extremists.
Right.
Do you know who was one of the speakers that they didn't say in the newspaper? One of the original 4 sit-in protesters. He's a black man.
Yeah.
So just to tell you that,
but that goes to my point, right?
Liking freedom and things like that. And I'm not a big proponent of the Tea Party, but I am a proponent of getting things right. That just seems to me that would have been a big part of the headline, wouldn't it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Former sit-in member speaks at Tea Party.
Tea Party event. And that goes to my point. That goes exactly to my point. And I was hoping with your working in that industry.
I'm going to give you So what did they do? Did they lie? No. Did they put that in the story? Yeah. They just omitted it out of the headline.
That's right. It's tailoring
by omission.
News. It's tailoring news. It seems to fit a narrative or an agenda. And we both know, right? I've talked to people. As a matter of fact, I marched when Bush was president still with the original Tea Party. What they portray it as
black people in the Tea Party.
Absolutely. There's liberals in it.
I think one of the original members is black.
Yeah. What? There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. It has nothing to do with neocon. It has everything to do with.
No, actually, the neocons don't like them.
That's right. That's why they pigeonhole them.
Look at
far right wing. Yeah. No doubt about it.
So here's what we're going to tell you. A lie by I'm gonna just kill this here.
Wait a minute. It could
a lie by omission. Here's another big lie by omission. And I have tomorrow on USA Watchdog, I have on the show. I have on William K. Black. He's the former bank regulator. He was also a professor of law and economics, a bank regulator in the Resolution Trust Corporation days, right?
Yep.
And so he says there's 2 big lies being told, and I've been complaining about this forever, and this is another lie by omission. And number 1, nobody got in.
Hold on. Hold the lie by omission.
Okay.
We'll touch on that as soon as we come back. We'll be back with Greg Hunter, who is the proprietor of USAWatchdog.com. Go there, subscribe. You have a newsletter, don't you?
Yes, I know. I don't lose that. Everything's free.
Oh, everything's free. Go over, check out USAWatchdog.com, bookmark it, go there every day. We'll be back with Greg Hunter and more Wide Awake News Radio in just a minute. Hang tight. Guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Greg Hunter, USA Watchdog, is our guest. He was beginning to tell us a story about lies of omission. And you were talking with someone, an interview you have coming up on your website tomorrow. Get back into it.
William K. Black, former banking regulator in the Resolution Trust Corporation days, the savings and loan crisis, professor of economics, professor of law, University of Missouri, Kansas City, right? This is a good source.
Yeah.
And he says, lie number one, and this is something I've been harping on for, I can't tell you how long I've been harping on this since my site's been up, is that these guys have committed massive crime. Let me just sum up the housing. They sold liar loans, no doc loans. They sold them. They packaged them into securities. That's fraud. That's securities fraud. They rated them AAA when they indeed were not. AAA equal to a risk-free return like a treasury. They were not. They paid a higher interest rate. They were not. And then when it all blew up, they committed forgery and perjury and fraud on the court that they called robo-signing. Like somebody signed a document really fast. No, they were creating fraudulent documents so they could steal houses.
That's right.
Then you take a look at some of the other crimes. I mean, we had HSBC late last year. They admitted to laundering money for Mexican and Colombian drug cartels.
That's right.
They admitted to helping Iran fund whatever they're doing. The West says they're building a nuke. I don't know what they're doing, but they're on the terror. If they are on the terror watch list, okay, they got just a fine.
Yeah.
Nobody went to jail. LIBOR, massive rate rigging, and an $800 trillion of interest rates are set up that much. Anybody go to jail? Anybody go to jail at HSBC? Nope. Anybody go to jail in the banking? That's right. And you know what we were told, and this is according to William Black, we were told that the first big lie is that, the bankers, this was the first crisis we ever had where there was no malfeasance, the bankers they stopped doing crime. Lie. That's a lie. They committed have and are still committing massive crimes. Nobody's gone to jail. Number two, our Attorney General, Eric Holder, was in front of Congress not more than a month ago and said, the reports, with them stealing houses and fined $8.5 billion for improperly foreclosed. Stealing? You mean stealing? I mean stealing houses. Improperly foreclosing on houses and the LIBOR.
Stealing.
Come on. I mean, you don't have any credibility if you did not major crime. So you know what they're saying now. Eric Holder testified and said, well, we can't prosecute because, we're afraid of causing damage to the national economy. Imploding. That's the same thing they said with HSBC, which is, according to William Black, preposterous. And now they're saying, you're gonna have all these fines. Well, wait, stop. William Black says if the economy is so weak that they can't prosecute present and former officers of the banks, the big banks, the largest banks, the regional ones, I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about the big ones, that then by the nature of this logic, then the fines have to be minuscule. And they are. Three big lies. That the bankers didn't commit crime. They did. Enormous crime. It's documented crime. Enormous. Number two, that, if we prosecute these people, that, we would implode the financial system. Lie. Number three, we don't really need to prosecute. We'll get fines out of them. It'll really be a deterrent. Lie.
Look.
All lies.
And
this is what our economy is based on.
Just by the Attorney General saying we cannot prosecute them because they are systemic to the global economy.
That's right.
That is a license to kill. It's a license to do whatever they want.
Do you think there's going to be less crime and less stealing, or do you think there's going to be more crime and more? This is the underpinning of the economy.
That's right. HSBC.
And we printed out all this money to save it, right?
Yeah.
Has anything been fixed? No. Has anybody gone to jail? No. Have they taken any of these banks to receivership, which William Black said they should have taken Bank of America into receivership? I mean, keep the bank, fire all the officers, bondholders, you're gone. Shareholders, poof, you're gone. Depositors will protect them. It would have been so much cheaper.
Right.
I mean, to fix this whole financial system, to protect the depositors and bondholders, shareholders, poof, you made bad investments, would have cost $6 trillion. Do you know what the GAO audit of in the wake of the financial crisis, the one-time audit they put in the FinReg bill rendered as $16.2 trillion they pumped out to save everybody from, foreign banks to Harley-Davidson to Toyota. They loaned them the $16.2 trillion, I think 7 or 8 trillion went just to the banks.
Yeah. I mean, there's no.
Is this fixed? Do you see anything fixed?
No, I don't. And even more shocking than the fact that it isn't fixed is the complicit nature of anybody who calls themselves media or a journalist.
It's not journalism.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
And why would it be when NBC, CNBC is owned by one of the exact companies you're talking about? When you talk about General Electric, receiving billions of dollars of bailout money.
Here.
Yeah.
Today?
Yeah.
2 major shareholders: Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. I'm sure that has nothing to do with
No. It's all because they don't do that, Greg. We were told they don't do that. They don't commit crime. I mean, the system is.
Well, they just don't cover. And what they do, it's just like, they were fined. It's they put some small little story like in the back of the paper, said,
and they were fined
down over here somewhere, which there isn't one in this thing.
Yeah, and they were fined. And they paid, with taxpayer bailout money to begin. We're going to be back with Greg Hunter, USAWatchdog.com. Hang tight. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Greg Hunter of USAWatchdog.com is our guest. Again, go to his site. Check it out every single day. A lot of great interviews, a lot of great stories that Greg writes. Bookmark it. Check it out every single day. Greg, I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to let you go. Let you run with it, not leave, but let you run with it, because I know you're going to have plenty to say. In the year, let me start with the last 2 days. We've seen this massive dump in gold, right? We've seen this huge, almost 10% drop in one day. The media is freaking out about it. Most media is saying that it proves that gold was in a bubble and blah, blah, blah. You pulled up that article showing one news outlet that actually showed it was contracts that are being dumped. But
it was USA Today. I mean, that's a legitimate source, right? It confirms that it was one dump. And
it was.
Why would you dump if you're trying to get out of an asset? Why would you take a big, giant loss by dumping everything all at one time, unless you were trying to make the price go one direction? Evidently, a lot of the banks were the buyers on the other end.
Sure,
the big banks.
Sure, but let me make this point, because I put this out in a video, and it's factual. In 2011, gold fell 20% in a very short period of time. Directly after that, we had the pesky European debt crisis go from a nuisance, a worrisome nuisance, to a full-fledged crisis that required unheard of, unprecedented central bank action in order to stave off a financial collapse.
We still have a dollar swap facility open, and there's no telling how many dollars they've sent over there.
Right, and previously to that, in 2008, July of 2008, gold had dropped 21%, again, in a very short period of time. Within 2 months, we had Bear Stearns, we had Lehman, and everybody remembers what has happened since then. So there is precedent for this massive move in gold, and usually when it drops like this very, very quickly, something really, really nasty is right around the corner. At least that's been recent history. Now, what is your take? What are you hearing from the people you've interviewed and talked to, who some are freaking out, or some are using this as an opportunity? Some have theories on, as you alluded to one of them, these massive dumping of contracts. What on earth is going on with this massive move in precious metals?
Paul Craig Roberts, former assistant Treasury Secretary. When I say assistant, I mean somebody getting coffee. I mean somebody that might have 500 people working for him at Treasury. Right. Treasury Secretary, assistant, and 4 or 5 of them. He did economic policy. He's got a PhD in economics, too. So he says that...
good guy.
He's got a PhD in economics. He doesn't have to talk. He can just go to his beach house on the Florida coast, or his mountain house, or, he's 74 or 5, something like that. It's a bright guy. Anyway, he says that, if gold was not a threat, they wouldn't attack it. Now, all these contracts are dumped, whatever, but let's just look at the facts. I mean, Japan is dumping the equivalent of $1.4 trillion. They're pumping out $1.4 trillion to buy debt and to raise their inflation target. The U.S. is printing $1 trillion a year, $85 billion a month, $40 billion for the mistakes and fraud of bankers, mortgage-backed securities. And incidentally, they should be asking which banks are getting that $40 billion every month, and $45 billion to buy treasuries. This suppresses interest rates. And then you have the whole ECB action, and there's money being printed over there. We have a dollar swap over there. We have no idea what's happening. We can't audit the Fed. So you have this massive, and now Russia is recently saying they're going to print money and inflate their economy and stimulate their economy. So we have this massive amount of fiat currency, this currency war, as Jim Rickards so aptly put it in his best-selling book. We have everybody printing money all at one time to try to gain a competitive advantage for their currency, and what they're doing is just devaluing. That's why gold's rising in all currencies. But Paul Craig Roberts on my site said they're attacking it because it's a threat to the dollar. Gold is being attacked because it's a threat to the dollar. That's his theory. But I got to tell you, with all this money printing and all this instability and all this, and the picture I'm painting, I'm going to tie it all together. I mean, we have felons. That's the title of my thing. Felons are in charge, left in charge of these institutions. These guys have committed felonies.
No doubt.
There are no prosecutions. Not only are there no prosecutions, there's no investigations. They're not doing anything.
There's outright admittance by the top cop of the land that they can't go after him.
Evidence is clear that enormous crimes have been and are being committed. And we have to put up with this because the economy would collapse if we didn't. That's what the story is, which is preposterous and outrageous. But nobody in the mainstream media is giving you this. I mean, they did have the Frontline thing on PBS. I'm surprised somebody didn't get fired over that at public television, where they basically laid out the story in the mortgage-backed security arena. But there's other massive frauds. I mean, this HSBC thing happened after. They admitted to money laundering. They admitted to helping countries on the terror list.
That's right.
If you can't go to jail for that, then you can't go to jail for anything.
That's right. You literally could be held responsible for the death of individuals. If you're HSBC and you're doing thousands, not one or two slip through the crack, literally thousands and thousands. I believe the number was 64,000 transactions that were questionable, and thousands of them, they had people inside their institution who had flagged them, yet they were told, no, let that go. And this is dealing directly laundering money for drug dealers, for cartels, like you said, in Mexico and Colombia, and these nations that the American people are told we should be terrified of because they're part of the axis of evil, and we fight wars. We're having our men, our women are dying fighting these same nations. Their nationals are dying by the who knows how many hundreds of thousands. This institution gets slapped on the wrist. Now, the Justice Department and everybody involved said, yeah, well, they got the biggest fine in the history of finance. So what? How many? I mean, we're talking a few $1 billion, a rounding error for these institutions.
1.9 billion, and do they ever really collect that? I don't know. I mean,
and who cares? This is money that, in a lot of cases, was handed to them in the first place, or they have special privileges of borrowing it at nothing, turning it around, parking it back at the Fed, and making money on it. A couple $1 billion to HSBC is it's a joke. It's an absolute.
They've had other, according to William Black, they've had other frauds as well.
Right.
I mean,
sure.
And this is so. If you tie this all together, that the financial system is being run by people who have committed felonies.
Right.
And the reason why they don't want to prosecute them is too many details would come out that would shake confidence.
Right.
That people would say, wow, they did that? Ooh, I don't know if I want to even have my money in that institution. Ooh, run some back. And that's the reason why they haven't, nobody in Congress, Republican or Democrat, will ask the question, excuse me, Mr. Bernanke, which banks are getting this $40 billion? I mean, everybody's all, sequester. We don't want to raise taxes, $85 billion. We don't want to cut anything, $85 billion. Hey, I got an idea. And, Democrats, Republicans, let's stop just the banker part of this $85 billion a month. That's for 2 weeks, 2 months and a week, and that'd be $85 billion. Can we do that? And who's getting the money? And that's the thing. People don't understand that. They say, housing prices are up. Really, and the stock market's up. I mean, they're suppressing interest rates. This is a stated policy of the Federal Reserve. Yes. This is why they're doing it. Now, you think about this. This is more than $1 trillion a year, $85 billion a month times 12, a little more than $1 trillion in change.
Yep.
Okay? And they're doing it to keep the economy from imploding. And on Fox News, I can't believe this got out. I put this on my site. I don't post every day, but I posted, an off day where it was, the former White House budget director, David Stockman, saying if they stop this, the economy, this is his quote, the economy would turn into a calamity in 6 weeks. And I say 6 weeks. If they announced they would stop it, it would turn into a calamity in 6 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be
I mean,
overnight.
it'd be sell. It's
It
unbelievable.
would be
This
overnight.
is what's propping up the economy. And listen, the 30-year mortgage, okay, the 30-year set off the 10-year Treasury bond, and the average price is, I don't know, 1.8%. Okay, that's yielding about a what? A 3.6, 3.5, 3.7% 30-year mortgage, right? So 1.8% yielding about a 3.6 or 7 30-year mortgage, somewhere in that neighborhood, 3.5, somewhere. And so the average 10-year Treasury is about 4% over the last 40 years. So let's just go to the average. So if 1.8% yields a 3.6% 30-year note, what does a 4% Treasury yield?
It's going to yield you right around, 9%?
7 or 8%?
Okay, yeah, okay.
What happens to the housing market at 7 or 8%?
It's over. It is over.
What happens to our debt?
It explodes. It's unpayable. I don't know what the percentage is
4%.
where it gets towards 4% unpayable. We're going to be back with Greg Hunter.
10-year Treasury.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be back with Greg Hunter, more Wide Awake News Radio after this final break. Hang tight. If Greg Hunter and I were stuck in an hour-long conversation, there would be more words spoken in that hour conversation, I think, than 5 people. We both like to talk, and we talk right through the break. And we continue now, the final segment. Let me ask you this, Greg. Greg Hunter, USAWatchdog.com. You have a lot of contacts in the banking institution. Last time you were on, or in the financial institutions and in the financial system, you have a lot of people that you rely on for information. A lot of them you brought before cameras in 2007, told you the truth. Last time you were on the program, we were talking about, and I told you that folks I talk to on a daily basis are all talking about how this feels like 2007, 2008 all over again. We see a massive correction, call it what you will, a suppression in precious metals 2 days ago. What are you hearing from the folks that are in the know that you have as contacts?
I'm going to tell you what my most recent interview, which is going to post tonight after midnight, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. William Black, who's a former banking regulator, and he says we're primed for the next financial calamity, the next financial collapse. We're absolutely primed. Why? Nothing's fixed. We have felons running the system. They're committing massive amounts of crime. Crime and fraud makes the system inherently unstable. And so we have all these problems, and there's a huge, and people don't like to talk to it because my eyes cross over, they go cross-eyed when you talk about the derivative exposure, which is massive leverage. I mean, some of the banks have, hundreds to 1 times their capital for leverage. And what people don't realize is they still are allowed to, value assets on their books because of the Financial Accounting Standards Board change in 2009, which is, I think, government-sanctioned accounting fraud that allows them to value these assets on their books, millions of foreclosed homes in the shadow industry at par, at whatever they think they can get for them in the future. But if you take a look at the derivative exposure, I mean, Comptroller of the Currency said the 4 or 5 biggest banks have, 220 or 30 trillion dollars in derivative exposure. And yes, it's supposed to be bilaterally netted, and it's supposed to cancel everything out, and everything's supposed to be a neat little package where it won't cause any trouble. Really, you saw how well that worked with AIG.
Yeah, and MF Global.
You saw how well that worked with Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers.
Yeah. And recently, MF Global. I mean, a $2 billion haircut on Greek debt, they're out of business.
Well, yes, and then they have a hypothecation, which the trial balloon there is that brokerages can loan your money out, and you could become second or third in line to somebody else who loaned them money in the what do they call it, the chaotic days before the collapse. Oh, really? They were chaotically trying to get money in and putting up accounts. It was supposed to be allocated accounts. And they loaned that out, and they hypothecated it, and they said, "Oh, most people got their money back." That's not what I'm hearing.
Right.
That you become, second in line to your own money.
That's right. That's why I said, looking at Cyprus as a model, when Joran Dijsselbloem, at the head of the European Stability Mechanism, said that this is the model going forward. He quickly retracted that statement, but it doesn't matter. This is going to be the model going forward, where the bail-in will occur instead of the bail-out.
But I don't think the banks, it's not so much the banks and the depositors, and maybe it is, But the brokerage accounts, the brokerages, the SIPC has a billion, a couple of $1 billion, one point something, five. I called them up last year. They got $1 billion or two, something like that, to insure, I don't know, $7 or $8 trillion in assets. So that helps if your broker runs off with his secretary and takes your money. But I'm telling you, I think the biggest Achilles heel, because we're always fighting the last war, right, is I think people who think that they have great investments in these brokerages are going to find out some of them are going to be in some big trouble with derivatives. Two of the ones that I like the most, but I don't get paid. I don't trade stocks. I'm not a trader. I sell no assets. Edward Jones, because they don't have derivative exposure, and also Scottrade, they have very little derivative exposure. And if I was going to have money in a brokerage, those at very least I'd make sure that they had very little exposure to the derivative trade, because they can get wiped out. And if they have a credit default swap, it depends on, you offload that risk, and if it blows up, then the person you offloaded to has to be solvent, and if they're not, you're back to having the risk, and that's, I think, is going to happen a lot. There's no, when we have credit default swaps, it's insurance. There's no real insurance commissioner that says, "Oh, you have to have so much capital to back that up." It's the wild, wild west. I can't believe anybody ever even believes that they'll ever get paid, but I guess some people do. But in a big meltdown, there's going to be a lot of people going to be untold.
Everything is a con game. It's a confidence game. And until, the first domino, you talked about 6 days implosion. No, it's going to be more like 6 minutes. That's exactly right.
6 weeks. I said 6 minutes or 6 hours or 6 days. Yeah. 6 weeks, no.
Right. And so when the confidence is broken and when the dominoes start to go, it won't be a long, drawn-out thing like we've seen with the European debt crisis and like we've seen with our own financial crisis. It is going to be almost instantaneous. Would you not agree with that?
Well, I don't know if it's be instantaneous, but it's going to be trouble. And this is why I like sources. I do disagree slightly with William Black, but then again, there could be all these other wild cards that I didn't even ask him about. War on the Korean Peninsula, the Israelis attacking Iran attacking the Israel. Syria blowing sky high. I mean, the black swans of war could just kibosh the entire global financial system. There is no question about that. We're not even talking about that. But I will tell you that you should listen to the David Stockman interview. He was the White House budget director in the first 4 years of the Reagan administration. And, there's stories that he made a bunch of money with BlackRock, and he made, but he's out there now. And when he talks about how the economy would implode, and that is a theme of mine and other people they're printing this $85 billion a month, not just to goose the market, not just to get employment down. If they stop doing it, the economy would implode. Interest rates would shoot up. The $45 billion they're buying for our debt, we'd have to put out on bid. Interest rates for our debt would shoot up. Mortgage rates would shoot up. The economy would implode. Period. The end. So they're printing $85 billion a month to prop up the economy. And now I ask you, does that make you feel all warm and tingly that they're printing this money? And the mainstream media is oblivious to this. It's like, oh, yeah, that's normal. This never happened before. Open-ended QE has never happened before. They're talking about maybe ending it. But even people like Rick Santelli on CNBC, who's a connected guy, says there's no way. They're not stopping it by the end of the year. No way.
That's like the same argument that they're going to raise interest rates potentially the next quarter. They can't do it.
They would implode the economy. I don't see how they could.
They can't do anything other than debt. That's right. They can't do anything other than stay the course. And like your interview with Rick Rule that you can find at USA Watchdog, he says it. Regardless of if they do it now or they do it in the future, this is coming apart. So obviously they've taken the choice of they're going to stay the course, buy $1 trillion a year in debt, keep interest rates at ridiculously low levels. And
that's what we know about $85 billion a month. There's one of my sources, Fabian Calvo, who handles $100 million of distressed debt, and he says, "Oh, it's more than the $40 billion a month they're taking off the bank's books. It's more than that."
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly how much, but it's more than that. And that's the thing is that, and I don't like to tell people I don't like to give investment advice other than that They should probably have the title to their car. They should probably have some new tires on their car. They should, if they can, have their house paid for, have some food. Yes, if you have some cash and you have everything paid for, maybe you need to have some gold and silver as a core asset that you hang on to, but it's not a trade. Right. I tell people, don't think about trading. Think about Cyprus. Now, if you had cash and gold and silver and everything paid for, how did you do in the Cyprus banking crisis?
It was a nice show, but it really didn't affect you.
It really didn't affect you. So that's what I'm saying. And you do need some cash. I mean, people are like, oh, don't get cash. Well, cash, Bob Moriarty said this. He's at 321 Gold. This is a great little piece of analysis. And he says, people are going to get mad at me for this. He said this about a year ago. He said, people get mad at me for this, but, you should have cash because cash is going to work really well for about 6 months if we do have another systemic crash. And you know what? He's right. People aren't going to go to the gas station and say, here's a 10th ounce of gold. Here's a 2 silver eagles. They're not going to do that. Oh, here's 6 quarters that are 1964 earlier. Would you you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Eventually, I think that will, that could happen. But
well, it depends.
It's going to work really good for a while. And I lived in Florida for a while. And you look at anybody a friend of mine is up in New York, and he was one of these kind of these preppers, not a crazy prepper, but he had food, he had water in case there's something happened, or power went out, or a hurricane happened. And you know what? The thing still isn't. I mean, he had about 2 or 3 really tough weeks where they couldn't get food, they couldn't get water, the power went out, in all the buildings around him. And so I'm saying, listen, at least have enough to be able to take care of yourself short term. Have some water, it's cheap. Have some rice, have some.
And I probably
like you're in Florida, in case there's a
I'm probably a whole lot more. Right, I'm probably a whole lot more conspiratorial than that, Greg, because look, everything you eat comes 1,500 miles in a semi. If there is a nuke in the Korean Peninsula, or there is a sinking of an aircraft carrier off the coast of Iran,
and that could happen.
That could all happen, and you interrupt the supply chain. Guess what? You might be wishing you had weeks and weeks worth of commodities in your home that you could survive on. So, I mean, to say that our current situation is tenuous is probably an understatement.
Well, even in good times, I mean, that's just smart. That's just not. They want to paint people who are preppers as some crazyville. But take a look at the hurricane. Take a look at that was a suitcase nuke. Heaven forbid in Boston.
Right.
Could you imagine how difficult it would be to get food into the Boston area?
Yeah. Well,
even if it wasn't that bad of a contamination, who would drive a truck in there?
Look what happened when that hurricane hit New York, right? A category 1 or whatever. They were devastated for weeks and weeks.
Yes, sir. I mean, so people should just protect themselves. It's gold and silver, when it comes back to that, are an insurance policy. If you're trying to get out there to trade the markets and make it a trade, you shouldn't. You should have what you think you need to insure your financial assets. How much do you need outside the system? That's up to individuals. I can't, I don't.
Yeah, and that's interesting. We talked about that in the last hour, that if, even in this community, even in the independent truth, freedom movement community, most people are still considering that gold and silver in dollars. And if you think of it as a trade, then you're going to have some sleepless days, because especially silver, there's nothing more violent than the currency, the fiat currency price of silver. Greg Hunter, usawatchdog.com. Another great interview. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on here. We'll try to get you back on again next month.
Good to be on.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Guys, please stay tuned for Jeff Rins, because he is coming up next. And like I said, I am gone on business for the rest of the week. I will be back Monday at the regular time. Thank you ahead of time for the guest hosts who are coming on here and giving you some live programming for the rest of the week. All right, guys, enjoy Jeff. He's next. Have a good night. Peace.